You ever get that weird feeling like you've been here before? Not deja vu, not a dream, something deeper. Like you agreed to this life and forgot. Well, maybe you did. By the end of this episode, you'll see why thousands of people across countries, cultures, and even time are all remembering the same impossible thing, and why science might finally be catching up to something ancient religions and mystics have said all along. We don't just live once, we pass through something again and again. And some of us, we never forget. So let's start with a story. She was 7 years old, blue swimsuit, family picnic, hot summer day. She's wading in the lake, chasing dragonflies until her foot catches on something. She slips, goes under, can't breathe, so she panics, kicks, but it's too late. The world goes quiet. She's not in her body anymore. She's above it, looking down at her mom and dad, screaming on the shore. The lifeguard blowing his whistle, people running all over the place. And then something else is there. She doesn't see it, she feels it. It's not a person, but it knows her. It says nothing, but she hears the words anyway. Are you ready to remember who you are? Years later, she's in her 30s, trying past life regression therapy for anxiety. Midway through the session, she freezes. Tears fall down her face. She describes that same drowning, the same dragonflies, the same voice. Her therapist leans forward, silent, because last week, another patient totally unrelated told the exact same story. Same age, same lake, same words. She didn't remember a past life. She remembered the space between them. And what is that space? And why are more and more people remembering it? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most controversial and astonishing investigations of the last 50 years, the work of Dr. Michael Newton, thousands of hypnotic case studies, the map of what happens after death and before rebirth, and the eerie consistency of the between lives memories. If it's real, it could change how we see everything: life, death, even the soul. But if it's not, then why do people keep remembering the same things they were never taught? Let's find out. Hey, if you're still here, it means you're not just here for the surface level stories. You're chasing something deeper, like we are. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe, because if we don't build this community, the algorithm isn't going to help us, and no one's going to tell these stories at all. All right, onward. So here's the deal. Dr. Michael Newton wasn't some crystal slinging past life guru. He was a clinical hypnotherapist. Basically, a guy who helped people stop smoking or get over their fear of flying using hypnosis. But one day, something weird happened. A client goes under. They're supposed to revisit a childhood memory. Instead, they start describing what it felt like to die. Not in a scary way, just like it happened yesterday. Then they start talking about what happened after. Not heaven, not hell, not some great big nothing. It was something else. They said they floated above their body. They met someone or something, got shown their life like a movie, then drifted into a place of light, where other souls were waiting, where decisions were made about where to go next. Newton thought it was a fluke until it happened again, and again, and again, and again. Over the next 40 years, he'd put more than 7,000 people into this deep hypnotic state. They came from all walks of life, different religions, different backgrounds. Some believed in nothing at all. And yet, when asked to describe what happens after death, they all described the same place: a realm of light, a soul group, a council of beings, a life review, and a choice. Sometimes even a mission. So, what if Earth isn't the test? What if it's the classroom? Before he mapped the afterlife, he didn't even believe in it. No ghosts, no reincarnation, no spiritual dimension at all. Michael Newton was a clinical man in a clinical field, but his clients kept dragging him somewhere he didn't want to go, somewhere between lives. And once he stepped in, he never came back the same. So, who was this guy? Was Michael Newton just another self help wizard selling reincarnation Kool Aid? Well, actually, no. Newton had a PhD in counseling psychology. He was a hypnotherapist trained to help people deal with trauma, phobias, and deep rooted behavioral problems. Think emotional root canal minus the Novocaine. He didn't believe in past lives, he didn't believe in soul travel, he didn't believe in any of it. Until one day, a client in deep hypnosis didn't go back to childhood. They went back to what happened after they died. And Newton did what any good scientist does. He didn't argue, he took notes. Over time, more clients started going there. Same tunnel, same light, same weird details. He wasn't leading them, they were volunteering it. Totally unprompted, totally consistent, from people who didn't know each other. So Newton decided to lean in. He refined the technique, something he called life between lives regression. And by the time the 90s rolled around, he'd compiled so many case studies he couldn't keep them in his desk drawer anymore. So he published Journey of Souls in 1994, The Destiny of Souls in 2000, then Life Between Lives in 2004. That last one, it was basically a handbook for other therapists who wanted to explore this stuff. He even launched the Newton Institute, which now trains practitioners all over the world to help people remember the space between lives. And here's a quote from Newton, quote, "I was a reluctant convert, but the stories wouldn't stop." He didn't set out to find the afterlife, it found him. These weren't hazy dreams or poetic metaphors. They were structured, detailed, uncannily consistent. It was as if each person had stepped into the same waiting room, not of imagination, but of memory. 7,000 people, different countries, different religions, no contact with each other, and yet they described the same journey, as if they'd all been reading from the same script. But they weren't reading, they were remembering. Newton wasn't just scribbling down hallucinations, he was charting patterns. 7,000 people across decades from different countries, beliefs, and backgrounds, all under deep hypnosis. And here's the kicker, they all describe the same sequence of events. Not kinda similar, not close enough, like beat for beat. So let's walk through what most of them said happens after you die. First, the moment of death. Not terrifying, not painful, actually weirdly peaceful. Like finally exhaling after holding your breath for 80 years. Then, the soul floats up. You see your body. Sometimes you feel a little confused. Sometimes you don't care. Either way, you're out. Then someone shows up, a guide, a companion, someone you know, but not from this life. They don't drag you anywhere. They just show up and you remember. Oh right, it's you. From there, you go through what's called a life review. But it's not a slideshow, it's emotional playback. You feel what you made other people feel. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Newton's clients called it one of the hardest parts and the most healing. Then you move through a tunnel or corridor of light. Cliche? Yeah. But Newton didn't invent that. The people under hypnosis said it on their own, again and again. When you come out on the other side, it's like coming home. A place of familiarity, energy, and recognition. People talk about a feeling of pure love, of being seen for who they really are. Then comes the soul group. These are the others you keep incarnating with. Sometimes they're your spouse. Sometimes they're your annoying little brother. Sometimes they're that coworker who exists just to test your patience. You all meet up like a team checking the game footage. Then you stand before a council of elders. Calm, kind, no fire, no brimstone. Just cosmic grandparents who ask, "Did you learn what you came to learn?" And this is where it gets wild. Because next comes the part where you pick your next life. Sometimes you choose. Sometimes it's assigned. Sometimes you say no thanks and stay a little longer in the spirit realm. But eventually you go back. And right before you do, your memory gets wiped. Not because someone's hiding the truth, but because remembering everything makes the game too easy. Newton once said, "Advanced souls rarely incarnate on Earth anymore. It's too dense, too chaotic." Yeah, Earth is like the group project nobody wants to do, but everyone needs to pass. They didn't fear death, they feared forgetting. And that was just the onboarding process, the part before things got complicated. Because not every soul follows the rules, and not every return trip goes according to plan. So far, this all sounds like a really detailed episode of Cosmic Survivor. But here's where it gets weird in the best possible way. Because there are real world cases that back this stuff up. Let's talk about one of the most famous ones, the James Leininger case. James was 2 years old, a toddler, could barely talk. Then one day, out of nowhere, he starts having nightmares, screaming about plane crashes, fire, explosions. He'd wake up shouting, "Plane on fire, I can't get out." His parents were freaked. They were Christians, didn't believe in reincarnation, didn't even talk about war in the house. But James kept talking. He said he flew a plane called a Corsair during World War II. He said he took off from a ship called the Natoma Bay. He said he was shot down by the Japanese. And he kept saying one name over and over again, Jack Larson. So his dad starts digging, trying to prove it's just a coincidence. Except it's not. The USS Natoma Bay was a real aircraft carrier in the Pacific. The Corsair was a real plane used in the war. And Jack Larson, he was actually a pilot on that ship. His name is in the records. And James, he described how his plane was hit, down to the engine location and damage type. Exactly how the real pilot died. Then, get this, he said he missed his sister Anne. Turns out, the man James claimed to have been, James Houston Jr., a Navy pilot who died in 1945. And yeah, he had a real sister. Her name, Anne, and still alive. Now, let's zoom out. This kind of story is rare, right? Well, actually, not really. Dr. Ian Stevenson wasn't some spiritual influencer. He was a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, and he spent decades studying reincarnation cases. Over 2,500 of them. Mostly in kids between ages 2 and 6, because that's the age range where these memories tend to leak out, before the brain locks in and forgets. Some of the kids could name specific villages, describe jobs, speak languages they'd never been exposed to. In one case, a child said they'd been a teacher in a small village and named the school. Investigators went there. The school existed. The teacher had died. And the kid knew details that no outsider should know. Even birthmarks matched exactly where the previous life person had been injured or killed. Stevenson documented everything. He took photos, interviewed families, tracked down death records, published findings in peer-reviewed journals, not Reddit threads. This wasn't fluff. This was forensic. They didn't need faith. They had names, dates, and autopsy reports. And if you're interested in watching a full episode on the James Leininger, the kid that dreamt he was reincarnated as a pilot from World War II, I created a video just on that case because it is fascinating. You could find that down below in the links. Newton's patients are describing some soul waiting room with councils, light tunnels, and memory wipes. Sounds new, right? Well, not even close. Because thousands of years before Newton or clinical hypnosis, or even written history, civilizations across the globe were already saying the exact same thing. Let's start in the Himalayas. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is basically a user manual for dying. No joke. It lays out what happens after you die, what you'll see, and how not to freak out when it starts happening. And right in the middle of it, a realm called the Bardo. It's a kind of in-between zone. Not Earth, not the afterlife, just the space between lives. You go through light tunnels. You meet guides. You face a life review. You get offered a new body. Does that sound familiar? Now let's hit Egypt. The Egyptians didn't just fear death, they planned for it. Their version of the soul's journey, it moves through a cosmic underworld called the Duat. You get judged by a council. You meet gods who ask if you lived with truth. And your heart, it's weighed on a scale against a feather. Too heavy with guilt? You're out. Light enough? You move on. Also included memory recall, past life accountability, and yes, spiritual progression. They even believed you came back to Earth under certain conditions, which sounds suspiciously like reincarnation. Now, swing over to India. In the Hindu belief, the soul is eternal, but it takes many forms across many lifetimes. Your karma, aka your cause and effect scorecard, determines what comes next. Good life, you move up. Selfish life, you retake the test. And they have something called the Akashic Field, a kind of universal library that stores all thoughts, actions, and memories of every soul. Newton's patients said they visited a life library between incarnations. Different language, same concept. Now here's where things get spicy. The Gnostics were early Christian mystics who believed Earth wasn't exactly what it seemed. To them, the body was a trap. The soul was eternal, and the material world was a prison created by lower beings they called archons. Their goal? Keep souls recycling endlessly and forget who they are. According to Gnostic texts, the only way out is to remember and to wake up. Now compare that to Newton's clients, who all describe the memory wipes, emotional tests, and soul missions they agreed to but can't fully recall. Different century, same warning label. Maybe Newton didn't map the afterlife. Maybe he rediscovered it. We've heard the stories, we've seen the ancient parallels, but what does science say? Can we actually explain any of this soul travel, life between lives stuff with real physics? Turns out, maybe. Let's start with one of the weirdest, most quietly released government documents of all time. The CIA's Gateway process in 1983. Yes, that's CIA. In 1983, they commissioned a report called the Gateway Experience. It was classified, buried, and later dropped through the Freedom of Information Act like a weird little bomb. The report explored a method called hemisync, short for hemispheric synchronization. Basically, it uses sound waves to sync both sides of your brain and put you into a deep altered state. The goal? To access non-physical consciousness states. And yeah, they were dead serious. The report goes all in. It claims our reality is basically a hologram sitting inside a giant energy field. It says consciousness isn't stuck inside our brains. It exists outside of time and space. And under the right conditions, it says we can access something called the absolute. not a metaphor, that's literally what they called it. The absolute was a kind of source field that contains all information, all time, all consciousness, which sounds a lot like Newton's soul realm. Now let's talk about Robert Monroe, the guy who actually created Hemisync. He wasn't a guru, he was a broadcast executive who accidentally started leaving his body at night. Instead of freaking out, he turned it into a research institute. Monroe mapped out what he called focus levels, different states of consciousness that you move through when you detach from the body. And the deeper you go, the more it mirrors Newton's sessions. Focus 21, soul detachment. Focus 27, reunion with soul groups. Beyond that, memory libraries, higher councils, even life selection. Monroe even trained US military personnel through Operation Stargate, a classified program for remote viewing, which is basically astral projection with paperwork. Then there's the ORC-OR theory from Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. It stands for Orchestrated Objective Reduction, which is just science's fancy way of saying your consciousness might actually exist at the quantum level inside tiny structures in your brain called microtubules. Now, that's a real hypothesis, not New Age fluff. And if that's true, then your consciousness might not die when your brain does. It might just relocate. And one last kicker. Scientists have noticed that at birth, right around the time we enter this world, our brain wipes short-term memory. Could this be what Newton's patients were describing? The memory erasure before reincarnation? Could be chemicals, could be biology, could be something else. If consciousness is quantum, then death is just a phase shift. Up until now, this whole life between lives thing has sounded kind of beautiful. Peaceful death, soul guides, cosmic libraries. Like your soul gets a massage and then signs up for another round on Earth. But what if it's not voluntary? What if the so-called journey isn't a mission, but a loop? Let's start with a theory that sounds completely nuts until you look at the receipts. The Saturn-Moon matrix. This idea comes from David Icke, former soccer player, BBC host, turned professional heretic. He claims Saturn is broadcasting a frequency, and that frequency is being amplified by the moon, like a giant cosmic satellite dish. And what's it doing? Projecting a false reality grid. In other words, Earth isn't base reality, it's a high-tech illusion, and Saturn is the broadcaster. Now, sounds crazy, right? Except Saturn is the most magnetic planet after Jupiter. It gives off way more energy than it receives. And at its North Pole, there's a perfect six-sided storm, a hexagon, spinning like a locked-in signal. Some researchers, fringe ones to be clear, think this hexagon might not be natural. They call it containment geometry, a frequency fence. Saturn in ancient myth was Kronos, the god of time, but also the god of control, of cycles, of limits. Now pair that with the moon, an object that just happens to be the perfect size to eclipse the sun from Earth down to the decimal. It's too perfect, almost like it was placed there. And if this is true, then the reincarnation loop might not be a growth experience. It might be a farm. Now, let's go older, like way older. The Gnostics, a spiritual sect wiped out by the early church, had their own view of this whole setup. To them, Earth wasn't home, it was a prison. The body, a cage. The material world, an illusion. And behind it all, entities called archons, not human beings that feed on spiritual energy. According to their texts, these archons keep souls trapped in an endless reincarnation cycle, wiping our memories, convincing us to return again and again. Never remembering who we were, just starting over, confused and docile. Does that sound familiar? Now here's where it gets real uncomfortable. Some people who've had near-death experiences report seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, but also say they felt like they were being pushed back, pressured, even tricked. Others say a presence appeared, not to offer help, but to convince them to return. To say things like, "You're not finished yet. You still have work to do." But what if that voice isn't on your side? What if the light at the end of the tunnel is bait? So let's get one thing straight. If the government thinks something might give them a tactical edge, they will study it. No matter how weird it sounds, no matter how off the wall it seems. And when it comes to the soul, they didn't laugh. They wrote reports. First up, Edgar Mitchell, astronaut from Apollo 14, moonwalker, Navy pilot, NASA engineer. Not exactly your local meditation guru. But after his mission to the moon, something in him changed. He said he felt the presence of something bigger. Not God, not religion, just a knowing that consciousness doesn't die. We are not alone, and consciousness survives death. That's a direct quote from him. So what does he do when he gets home? He doesn't disappear into the woods or write a memoir. He founds the Institute of Noetic Sciences, a research center focused on ESP, healing, and life after death. Not in secret, not as a side hustle. He went all in. Now let's talk about the CIA. We already covered the gateway process, their deep dive into out-of-body travel and consciousness expansion. But that was just the surface. Behind closed doors, they ran Project Stargate, a black-budget program to train psychic spies. And the goal? Remote viewing. Basically, using your mind to spy across the world or across dimensions. And, buried in all that, hints of something deeper, like soul mapping, astral surveillance, non-local identity tracking. It's not in big bold letters, but it's there, sprinkled through CIA memos, declassified documents, and the weird footnotes they hoped no one would read. Then there's MKUltra. Everyone knows it as the mind control program that dabbled in LSD and hypnosis. But buried in the sub-projects were experiments in memory erasure, identity splitting, spiritual trauma implantation. Let me say that again. Spiritual trauma implantation. That's not conspiracy lingo. That's from their own records. So you tell me, why would intelligence agencies spend decades quietly studying astral projection, past life recall, and soul fragmentation? Were they just curious? Or were they building something? They weren't just studying the soul, they were trying to weaponize it. Right now, we're deep in the rabbit hole. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, is any of this real? And if we're gonna be honest, we have to look at both sides of the coin. So, first, the obvious. Hypnosis is messy. People under hypnosis are suggestible. Sometimes their brains fill in gaps with imagination. It's called confabulation. Basically, your mind trying to make sense of stuff it doesn't fully remember. So yeah, that's real. But here's the part that makes this harder to shrug off. We're not talking about one or two people spitting dream stories. We're talking about 7,000 sessions across different decades, different cultures, different belief systems. And they all described the same core experiences. Without being coached, without knowing each other, without even believing in reincarnation beforehand. And Newton? He wasn't selling crystal necklaces or angel cards. He was training licensed therapists with structured scripts, rigor, documentation. This wasn't a hobby, it was a protocol. Then you stack that next to UVA's Ian Stevenson, who verified 2,500 reincarnation cases with names, autopsies, and medical records. The James Leininger case, where a 2-year-old remembered the details of a World War II pilot's death, right down to the ship name. And the CIA's Gateway docs, which literally described consciousness detaching from space and time. All of these come from different lanes, but they line up like a puzzle someone scattered on purpose. One of Newton's clients once said, and I quote, "It felt more real than this life." So here's where we land. Do people lie under hypnosis? Sure, of course. Do people dream up nonsense? Absolutely. But when thousands of people under clinical conditions describe the same places, the same rules, and the same emotional patterns, that's not random. That's a signal trying to break through the noise. Even if 99% is noise, that 1% changes everything. We've talked about soul maps, councils, astro espionage, even Saturn playing jail warden. But now let's bring it back to you, right here, right now, breathing, watching this. What if you picked this life? Not in some big dramatic way, but quietly, before the beginning, like checking a box on a form. This family, that trauma, these challenges, that heartbreak. Not because you wanted to suffer, but because that's where the growth is. What if the person who hurt you, the one you can't forgive, was playing a role you asked them to teach you strength, or boundaries, or forgiveness, or how to finally say no? What if none of this was random? What if the mission wasn't to escape the pain, but to remember why it matters? Maybe that thing you call a breakdown was actually a breakthrough you planned all along. Maybe this life, your life, wasn't a mistake. Maybe it's exactly what your soul needed. Maybe the hardest lives belong to the bravest souls. If you made it this far, maybe you've felt it too. That quiet itch behind the noise, that pull towards something just out of reach. Like a memory you were never supposed to remember. We're not here to tell you what to believe. That's not our job. That's not the point. But asking the question, following the breadcrumbs, wondering if this, all of this, is way bigger than we've been told, that's what Divergent Files is about. We don't chase conspiracy, we chase the truth, even when it's buried, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it messes with everything we thought we knew. Because if Newton was even half right, then this life is more than just a grind to survive. It's a mission, a loop, a lesson, or maybe even a test. And the scariest part? We might have signed up for it. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, no matter what they tell you, the truth is still out there. These investigations are powered by those who believe truth still matters. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. Join the mission at patreon.com/divergentfiles.